Our universities promise intellectual honesty and the advancement of knowledge. But what happens when the professors themselves are engaged in intellectual theft, wire fraud, and even national security breaches? Welcome to the Deep Dive. Today, we're really getting into an issue that, well, doesn't get talked about nearly enough. We're looking at academic misconduct among university professors.
And we're going way beyond just, students cheating on an exam.
Exactly. We're talking about high-stakes intellectual theft, financial fraud, and the, frankly, shocking reality of federal investigations targeting faculty who are secretly working for foreign powers.
This is a deep dive we have to do because the problem is, well, it's existential. It really challenges the trust we place in our research institutions.
And the scale of it is just staggering.
It is. The foreign influence part alone is huge. The feds had to step in because universities weren't being transparent. Just between 2019 and 2021, Department of Education investigations on only 19 campuses. They forced those schools to report $6.5 billion.
$6.5 billion.
Billion. With a B. All in previously undisclosed foreign funds.
Wow. Money that was just flowing in, totally unmonitored, into institutions that you have to remember get massive support from U.S. taxpayers.
And that's the thing, that lack of transparency, it creates the perfect environment for these kinds of ethical breaches to happen.
So today, we're focused on accountability, on integrity. We're going to use some very specific real-world examples, mainly from the University of Arkansas system, to show you what's at stake when professors break that trust.
And to guide us, we've got a really solid stack of sources. We have journal articles that break down plagiarism, actual federal court documents on national security fraud, and some policy reports on academic freedom from groups like the AAUP and FIRE Mess.
So our mission today is to dissect three major threats to American higher ed. First, that federal fraud piece involving secret foreign ties.
Then the internal problem intellectual theft between colleagues.
And finally, how vague university rules can be used to shut down free speech and, the kind of dissent that's essential for a real university. This isn't just about footnotes. It's about protecting American research, our tax dollars, and the basic right to disagree.
Right. And we have to ask the big question. Is the system actually set up to protect research? Or is it just protecting the university's brand? Maybe looking the other way until a problem gets too big to hide.
Okay, let's start with the most serious kind of misconduct. Federal fraud against the U.S. government. This is often tied to foreign adversaries trying to steal American innovation. Let's unpack this with a really clear example. The case of Simon Sa-Tiong-Ang.
Simon Ang had a very powerful, very sensitive position. He was a professor at the University of Arkansas for decades, since 1988, and more importantly, he was the director of their High-Density Electronics Center. They call it High-DC.
And High-DC isn't just any research center, is it?
No, not at all. It's deeply involved in critical defense technology. We're talking high-reliability microelectronics, the kind of stuff that's essential for U.S. aerospace and military systems.
So while he's getting American taxpayer money to work on sensitive defense tech, he was also secretly taking money and other benefits from China.
That's right. And he was an investigator on grants funded by, major U.S. agencies. We're talking NASA and the U.S. Air Force. The deception was, well, it's calculated.
So what happened?
He was indicted on, get this, 42 counts of wire fraud and 2 counts of passport fraud. He ended up pleading guilty to 1 count of making a false statement to the FBI.
And the core of it wasn't just hiding some income on the side.
Not at all. It was hiding his loyalties. And here's the key part. Ang failed to disclose that he was listed as an inventor on 24 Chinese patents.
24. And I'm guessing university policy had something to say about that.
It has a lot to say. The University of Arkansas policy was crystal clear. The university, not the professor, owns the inventions from research done on their campus, especially federally funded research.
So what you're saying is he was essentially stealing intellectual property that was developed with U.S. grants and just handing the credit and the value over to China.
That's exactly what he was doing. That policy exists for a reason, for the public good, for national security. It's supposed to make sure research we pay for benefits us and stays protected. Ang just walked right over that safeguard.
And the federal response shows just how seriously they took this. This wasn't some internal university committee.
Oh, no. The FBI's Little Rock field office led the whole thing, but they had support from the State Department's Diplomatic Security Service, the NASA Inspector General, and the Air Force Office of Special Investigations.
When you see that many agencies team up.
It's crossed the line from just academic misconduct into a real national security threat.
And that connects right back to that staggering $6.5 billion number you mentioned. The Ang case, it sounds like, wasn't just a one-off. It's a symptom of a much bigger vulnerability.
It has to be. All that money universities failed to disclose. It suggests one of two things. Either they were incredibly incompetent, or there was a deliberate effort to hide where this foreign money was coming from, which let people like Ang exploit the system.
Either way, incompetence or malice, the outcome's the same. American IP and tax dollars were left wide open. The betrayal is really against the nation itself.
And if you think about it, that failure to police these huge external threats, it kind of sets the stage for the decay that can happen internally.
That is a perfect transition. So we've covered the external, high-stakes threat, but let's talk about the dishonesty that happens inside, between colleagues. Let's shift to plagiarism.
Right, which at its core is intellectual theft. You're taking something that isn't yours, an idea, data, and saying it's your own.
And it can be a lot more subtle than just copying and pasting a paragraph.
Oh, absolutely. The sources we looked at detail all kinds of professor-on-professor theft. Things like hearing a colleague's research idea and then just running with it yourself with credit, or reproducing someone else's teaching notes or even their exams.
I saw one of the most, insidious examples was treating a retired or deceased colleague's work as if it suddenly belongs to everyone.
Right, like it's just up for grabs.
The entitlement there is just
Yeah.
staggering. And we're not talking about a missed footnote. Look at the case of Mustafa Marucci, a professor who was fired from UNLV.
Yeah, that one was unbelievable. He plagiarized 23 out of 26 papers he'd written.
23 out of 26. That's not a mistake. That's a career built on fraud.
Which brings up the question of accountability. It just seems so much weaker for faculty than it is for students.
Well, yeah. Students get hauled before a disciplinary panel. For professors, it seems like it's all handled behind closed doors.
And a lot of faculty they turn a blind eye. One study showed that 40% of university professors ignore student cheating just because reporting it is too much of a hassle.
So if 40% won't even report a student, just imagine trying to blow the whistle on a powerful, tenured colleague, the person who might control your promotion.
The whole burden of proof is on you, the complainant. And you risk being ostracized, professionally blacklisted, just for pointing out misconduct, even if you were the one who was wronged.
And the institutions themselves almost seem to drag their feet.
It's a classic strategy. They start these long, opaque internal reviews that take months, sometimes years. It just exhausts the person who made the complaint. It takes up all their time, hurts their own career, and sends a message to everyone else. Don't bother reporting this stuff.
So the problem isn't just the thief. It's the system's lack of will to actually do anything about it.
Exactly. And when these things are handled privately, the consequences get watered down. Sometimes they disappear entirely. That lack of transparent enforcement just destroys the credibility of the whole academic community.
So if institutions can't even police clear-cut crimes like fraud and documented theft, what happens when they start using these vague, subjective policies to police thought itself?
And that's the third threat. This is where institutional policies can be weaponized to crush intellectual dissent and enforce a kind of, what critics call homogenous groupthink.
Where does this threat hide?
It's usually in the fine print of faculty handbooks. At a place like the University of Arkansas, for example, a professor can be fired for a pattern of conduct that is detrimental to the work environment. A very vague phrase.
And that's often tied to this idea of collegiality.
Right. Collegiality. It sounds nice, doesn't it? Who doesn't want to be collegial?
But groups that defend academic freedom, like the AAUP and FIRE, they absolutely hate using collegiality in faculty evaluations. They call it a worst practice.
They do, because it's so vague, it can be used to punish anyone who steps out of line. The policy could, in theory, be used to fire a professor who ignores instruction to teach the politically correct version of a subject.
So it becomes a tool to get rid of people who challenge the status quo. It discourages anyone from exploring a different perspective, which should be the entire point of a university.
And you can really see this issue of selective enforcement when you contrast how Simon Ang's wire fraud was handled versus how the university reacted to a professor's controversial political speech.
You're talking about the case of Shirin Saeidi.
Yes, she was the head of the Middle East Studies program at the University of Arkansas, and she was removed from that role after a huge public controversy.
And the controversy was over what exactly?
It was about allegations that she used official university letterhead to advocate for a convicted Iranian war criminal criminal's release, and also for posts on X where she praised Iran's supreme leader while calling Israel a terrorist state.
And the political backlash was immediate.
Oh, it was intense. A Republican state representative, Mary Bentley, said her constituents don't want tax dollars supporting unethical and anti-Semitic behavior. Mike Huckabee called her remarks hate-filled anti-Semitic venom.
And the university acted very quickly. They removed her as director.
It did. That's a position held at the pleasure of the dean, so they can do that. But here's where the tension lies. We have to separate her administrative job from her academic freedom as a professor.
Was the removal legitimate? Or was it just a response to political pressure to silence her?
That's the question. Critics argue that her statements, as controversial as they were, fall under the university's own board policy 405.1. That policy says that mere expressions of opinions related to the faculty member's scholarship shall not constitute cause for dismissal.
So the university can take away her directorship, but the real issue is whether the public outrage was used as an excuse to punish a dissenting voice.
Precisely. And critics would say it sends a clear message. The university is much faster to act when there's political outrage than it is to address the slow, corrosive threat of plagiarism, or the years-long massive fraud committed by someone like Simon Ang.
Which raises this huge conflict. When is controversial speech protected academic freedom, and when does it cross a line? And more importantly, why do universities seem more comfortable punishing the dissenter than the actual criminal?
Real accountability means you have to defend intellectual freedom, especially for unpopular voices, while at the same time coming down hard on documented crimes like fraud and intellectual theft. If you don't do both, you create a system where the honest critic gets silenced and the fraudster just gets managed.
So after this deep dive, what does this all mean for you, the learner, the citizen? We've uncovered a system that's grappling with, on the one hand, huge federal crimes,
wire fraud, foreign adversary,
and on the other, internal intellectual theft and these vague policies that can be used to suppress debate.
The credibility of the entire scientific community is really what's at stake here. When professors defraud the government or when institutions use fuzzy rules to shut down dissent, they're undermining the whole mission of the university. We have to demand real action against real misconduct, especially when our tax dollars and our national security are on the line.
And that's the final question, isn't it? If academic institutions choose silence or selective enforcement, cracking down on political controversy while fraud investigations drag on, if they do that just to protect their reputation, are they really protecting integrity? Or are they just burying the evidence that their own foundation is crumbling? What responsibility do we have as the people who fund these places and rely on their research to demand total transparency and integrity? That's a question we should all be asking.